Hi, I'm Miriam, and these are all the books I read in March of 2025. So unfortunately, we're starting with the DNFs. And while I do DNF a lot, so I have DNFs usually every month, this month I DNF'd a lot. So one that isn't as important is I DNF'd The Tales of the Gods by Rick Riordan. It's not important because I just DNF'd the audiobook. I really hated the way that the narrator read Grover, one of the characters, but I do hope to get to it in ebook. Probably, I don't think my physical library has it. But then let's get to the actual DNFs. The first one, very disappointing because it's like the second book in the series that I've DNF'd in a row, it's an interconnected series. You don't have to read it in order. Is Miss Amelia's List by Mercedes Lackey. This is the latest book in the Elemental Magician series, which is a historical fantasy series, mostly set in England. And this one, it does not matter what this one was about, because it wasn't actually what it said it was about. It was so boring. Nothing happened. All we did was watch them go shopping all day. And while I can definitely get behind books without plot. In fact, some of my favorite books have basically no plot or only character development. Our characters had nothing to them. Like, not only did they not have character development, they didn't even they weren't even three-dimensional. Like, they were at most two-dimensional. It was all tell, don't show. It's very disappointing. because Mercedes Lackey is also a favorite author. This is a favorite series for me. I've loved a lot of books in this series, so it's very disappointing. Especially because this is the second one in the series that I've DNF'd in a row, so for very different reasons. The next one I DNF'd is Vampires Never Get Old, which is a series of short stories about vampires, obviously. They're all YA, which is edited by Zoraida Cordova and Natalie C. Parker. And the reason I DNF'd this book is because I came across a story that was just super racist, and well, generally I would continue in an anthology that had a racist story. I would just skip the story. This one was very sensitive to me personally, first of all, and secondly, the more that I think about it, like at the beginning I was like, oh, I'm just so sensitive, but the more that I think about it, like the fact that the editors let the story get through, especially together with the fact that I wasn't, yeah, but the fact that the editors let the story get through says something about what kind of stories they're choosing. Like, they chose the story for the book, this incredibly racist story. And so I don't really want to be reading an anthology that has stories that are so racist. Okay. Another book I DNF'd is the Book of Living Secrets by Madeleine Roux. This book, I was I thought I might DNF it. I wasn't sure if I would like it or not. Basically, it's about these two girls who go into the world of their favorite book, and then discover that everything's not as it seems. There's like eldritch gods and stuff, but I actually never got that far because I just found the writing style really boring. It's fine. Okay, then I DNF'd George Washington by Time magazine. This actually wasn't the fault of the book. It was just formatted really, really badly, and the only way I have to read it is through the ebook. I suppose the physical book is formatted better, but the ebook was formatted really badly, so I don't want to read it. And then I DNF'd Zeus Grants Stupid Wishes by Corey O'Brien. Not sure if you could call this a DNF because I read the contents of the table and then like, actually I'm not that interested in it. It's also one that I put on my TBR when I was like 14, over a decade ago. My tastes have changed since I was 14. You can tell from the title, it's very like, let's make fun of stuff. And while I do enjoy joking around, and there are plenty of stuff that I like to make fun of still, I definitely do not like to make fun of stuff the same way I did when I was a teenager, especially when I was a young teenager. Okay, and I think that's actually all the books I DNF'd in March. I just DNF'd something else, but again, now it's April. but again, it was like, it's a softy enough. It was just, I hated the audiobook narrator, but that is for the April wrap-up that I will hopefully do, and this is the March wrap-up. So let's get to all the books I actually read in March and finished. Come here. Okay, the cats are fine. Although I'm sorry I keep on looking down. It's really hard for me to wear my glasses with these things, and there's so much noise going on right now, and I cannot see. I have such bad eyesight. So I'm sorry about that. Get baby! So as I was saying, the next book I read in March was Djinn City by Saad Hossein, which I have a reading blog for, and I really enjoyed it, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. It is basically about this kid, Indilbed, who comes from a very well-known family, but he comes from like the black sheep side of the family, and and then he discovers Djinn, and a lot of things happen from there. It's definitely not your typical fantasy book. It's very much science fantasy also because of all the science fiction stuff and how the Djinn work. And like I said, I really like it, but this is definitely not for everyone. The next book I read was Magic's Pawn by Mercedes Lackey. This is, again, it's a sequel series. This one doesn't actually spoil the first series because chronologically it's actually before it. So technically the first series in this world spoils this one, but it's hard to understand it if you go in without reading the first series because it's built on a world that's already built. But basically this one is about this teenager who feels very different from the rest of his family, and he's emotionally abused by his father, physically abused by his teacher, and he gets sent to live with his aunt, who is very important in the royal court. And this whole series is basically about his emotional development. This one, I did not like the first half, the first 2/3 at all. He has a romance, which is very quick, which I understand because there's something called life banded, which is basically their soulmates. So obviously their romance is quick, but that doesn't mean I like reading about it. I don't really like romances. If you're going to give me a romance, you have to show me how the romance develops fully and totally, and before that you have to show both of the characters to me. So while Mercedes Lackey did show me both of the characters, the romance, the love interest a little less, but still, the romance was just like, and annoyed me, and also the way some of the characters in here behaved annoyed me, like with regards to the romance. After the romance part was over, I did start enjoying it a lot more. The next book I read was Soccer on Sunday by Mary Pope Osborne. This might be my favorite book I read in all of March. It is part of a series called The Magic Treehouse. Follows two siblings named Jack and Annie as they find a magic treehouse which has books, and every time they point to nonfiction books, and every time they point to a book and say, I wish I could go there, the magic treehouse takes them to the time and place. And every 4 books is like a mini series, and they have missions. After the first 8 books or so, they don't have missions. After that, they start getting missions after they discover more about why this magic treehouse is, how it works, who's controlling it. So in this one, they go back in time to the World Cup, which Pele played in. And basically they're to learn a secret of being great from Pele, and it's just so vibrant. Pele doesn't actually really appear. They don't talk to him at all. They just see him playing soccer. But the way that Mary Pope Osborne wrote this book is so vibrant. I had such a fun time with it. Would I have such a fun time with it if I don't like soccer so much? I don't know. If it was like basketball or football, probably I'd have a little less fun time with it, but I still thought it was so good and written so well. And then I liked that so much. The Magic Treehouse books have non-fiction companion books for each one, these are aimed at little kids, like first graders, second graders, just learning to read. So obviously it's very simplistic. And this one was called Soccer, which she writes with her sister, who is named Natalie Pope Boyce. So this one, I enjoyed some of the stuff. I did skip over a lot, because it was stuff I already knew, like how to play soccer, what a foul is, what a corner is, all that kind of stuff I know. But I did find some like tidbits about women soccer players and this cool kids team in Thailand and stuff like that. I did find that very interesting. The next book I read was The Terror of Nero by Rick Riordan. So this is the last book in the Trials of Apollo series, which is a sequel series to the Heroes of Olympus series, which is a sequel series to Percy Jackson. Now, and the Olympians. Now, if you don't know what Percy Jackson is, have you been living under a rock? But basically, the series is the Greek gods are real, the Roman gods are also real, and they have children called demigods. Now, Trials of Apollo actually follows Apollo, the god, whose father, Zeus, gets angry at him and turns him into a mortal. And he has this, and it turns out Apollo is the god of prophecy. And it turns out all these places of prophecy are being stolen. And he has to go and fight against and rescue the places of prophecy. And a lot of this book is, again, it's about Apollo's emotional development and him learning not to be so arrogant, I always pronounce that word wrong, but not to be so arrogant and prideful, and also care about other people. Because he is a people now, he's not a god anymore. So this is the last one in the series. Overall, I really enjoyed it. It wasn't like a standout book for me. I'm not sure what my favorite book in the series would be, maybe the second one, but I enjoyed it. I liked the difference in how his demigod friend and him reacted to their horrible fathers. I thought that there was a good balance of humor and serious stuff. The only thing I didn't like is that in general, each book in all of Rick Riordan's series that I've read, I have not read the Kane Chronicles, and I DNF the Magnus Chase series. But the ones that I've read, so every book is basically there's one big bad that they fight against. And in this book, it ended up being two big bads, and it felt a bit choppy. Like the ending just felt a bit choppy because of that. But overall, I enjoyed it. Also, this one, I did listen to audiobooks for the whole series, and for these ones, they have a different audiobook reader than the Chalice of the Gods, and I really liked it. I would recommend the audiobooks for this one. The next one I read is Rad Women Worldwide, Artists and Athletes, Pirates and Punks and Other Revolutionaries Who Shaped History by Kate Schatz, and it also has an illustrator whose name I've forgotten, I'm sorry. This one is basically mini biographies of different women, generally slightly less famous, not totally less famous, but slightly less famous women who have done really cool things. Thing is, I did discover very quickly, well, not very quickly, but there was something like I was like, oh, that sounds cool, but it also sounds really weird. Let me look it up. And it wasn't true. So now I only trust the ones where they actually had the people with them, like the woman who actually working with them on it. So I don't like. I already knew going into it was going to be simplified, but the fact that I found out a wrong fact makes it, So I found it nice and fun. Like you're not going to expect anything really deep from here, but yeah, I did really enjoy learning about the third primate woman whose name is Barute. I forgot her last name. Caldicott, something like that. And so there's Jane Goodall, who worked with gorillas, Diane Fossey, who worked with chimpanzees, and Baruche, I'm sorry, I forgot, who works with orangutans. And actually the sanctuary she made for orangutans back in the 60s still exists and works today, which is really cool. Then I read Big and Little Questions According to Renjo Bird by Julie Bowe. This is a middle grade, even earlier, like third grade, fourth grade aimed at, about a girl whose parents get divorced and she tries to hide it from all her friends. And also, because of that, she's having friendship troubles, plus a new girl who isn't very nice comes to her class. This wasn't blow my mind book, but I did like it. I would definitely recommend this to any kid whose parents are getting divorced, but also I would just recommend it in general. I thought it was a very nice book, and I really enjoyed the way Ren's friendships and relationships with the other kids in her class were described. Then I read Once More with Chutzpah by Haley Neal. I don't want to talk about this book. Okay, so this is a book about a teenager who is patrilineally Jewish. That is, her mother is a non-Jew, her father is Jewish, which means that halachically, according to rabbinical Judaism, she is not Jewish. But according to anti-Semitism, she is Jewish. So she's patrilineally Jewish. She's not super culturally Jewish. They do have some Jewish things going on in her family, but she isn't like super into the culture. And she ends up going on this trip organized by a bunch of synagogues that have, it's very common thing that they take the kids to Israel. Now, on one hand, I enjoyed this book. This book is not really about her going to Israel. It's about her exploring her identity in a lot of different ways, both her sexuality and in things that have been happening, both that have happened in her personal life, and also her as a twin. She has a twin, and she does definitely have like some stuff going on with that she needs to figure out. Even though it's not like a major part of the book, don't worry. If like you think like, oh, it's gonna be they're gonna make her like such a big issue that she's a twin, they're gonna like go. No, she's obviously her own person. She's 17, but like, you know, it's not even necessarily about being a twin. It's just something. It's sibling stuff, you know. Anyways, so overall, I did enjoy this book. But I did have some issues with it. There were parts of the book where I felt that Haley Neal, the author, who by the way is also patrilineally Jewish, she was pandering to anti-Semitism, which of course is bad. Like, she said at least 2 facts that are incorrect, and she put a lot of other things, like not a ton, but there were some sentences where it's just like, you could put this in a way that actually would make sense. Like the very first thing that really annoyed me was when they're at the airport and their main character goes to her brother, did they also ask you all these questions about what countries you went to? And it was all Arab countries. And her brother's like, yeah, it was weird. Like, I wonder who Israel's enemies are. Like, now, since the war broke out in Russia, between Russia and Ukraine, they also ask you if you were in Russia. Like, it's not because it's Arab countries, it's because of who the enemies are. And because of the anti-Semitism that is so prevalent in the Arab world, that happens to be Arab countries. But, and, but, and then I looked up some stuff, and it turned out that before this book was ever published, before it was put out as an ARC, which is early copies for readers to like say if they like it or not, to like get some buzz for it, people started posting the most anti-Semitic comments on Goodreads. You can easily go and look up. They're still there, a lot of them, rating it 1 star. And she said, like, I didn't look this up actually. I did look it up. It was an interview, and she said in her interview that she had actually changed some things. Now, look, I still find pandering to anti-Semitism wrong. Also, this book was published before October 7th. But she was also, like, I feel like I can less critique her for that because of her experiencing anti-Semitism, because of her writing a book about a girl going to Israel. You know, so like on one hand I want to be like, don't pander to anti-Semitism, and I'm still on like that, but on the other hand I don't want to critique it as badly because of those aspects, because of how she was treated and why she wrote that the way she did. So that's Once More with Chutzpah. Now, after we read all that, I reread How Mirka Caught a Fish by Barry Deutsch. So this is the third and last in a trilogy about Mirka, who is a Jewish Haredi, ultra-Orthodox girl, who grows up in a small Haredi town somewhere in the U.S., And basically, each book she has this magical adventure, and she learns more about her stepmother, Fruma, and she also learns more about how to deal with stuff in life. I love these books so much. So I actually read this one first because that was the one I had access to when I originally read these books. And it says that they're not, you don't have to read them in order, they're just interconnected in the same world. That's not true. That's not true. Like, you can kind of understand it, but it is so, so much more understandable and has so much more depth once you read it as the third book in a trilogy and not just randomly. But also, I love the illustrations in here. It's a great book. I would definitely recommend it. Especially if, personally, I'm still religious, but I feel like this could be an interesting book if, you were Haredi and left, whether that was become Dati or Chiloni or Mr. T. I would be interested in hearing what people like that thought of it. Okay, then I read a bunch of picture books. The first one I read is All the Way to America, The Story of a Big Italian Family and a Little Spoon by Dania Carino. This is basically the story of Dania Carino's family and how they got to America. And it has its main object a spoon that keeps on changing functions as different generations of the family change the work they do. Now, this sounds really nice, but I didn't really like the illustrations at all. So unfortunately, I didn't really like it that much. Then I read This Is Not That Kind of Book by Christopher Healy. And this one also illustrator, who I forgot. This is basically a picture book, where the main characters all come from different genres of books. So they're trying to figure out what genre they're in. It's a cute book, but it's kind of too moralistic at the end. Then, last month in February, well, by now the last month is March, but in the month before March, in February, I read a picture book by Galia Bernstein, I Am Not a Cat, and I loved it. So I decided to read every other picture book by Galia Bernstein ever. So first I read Layla, which is about a baboon who finds the noise of her family overwhelming. So relatable. And she goes off to find her own way, and she finds this lizard, and she meditates with him, and she goes back and tells her family about it, and it's so cute, and the illustrations are so good. I just loved it so much. Definitely get it for every kid ever. Then I read The Pumpernickel Daffodil, also by and illustrated by Galia Bernstein. This is about a dog who comes from this very big show family, and he meets with a girl, and she is from a family that shows dogs, and they go to a dog show, and balagan, mistakes happen. Cute, but it's kind of like I've seen the same thing before. Then I read one that was actually written by Galia Bernstein and another person, Kate Banks. It's called Lost and Found, and it's about these animals in the wood who find this doll and don't know what it is and try to figure out what to do with it. Again, I thought it was a little too moralistic in the end, but overall, I actually found it very soothing. This would definitely be a good bedtime story for kids. And Galia Bernstein did not draw these pictures, so I found them a little less cute, but they were still nice. I just was like, I am in love with Galia Bernstein's drawing style, illustration style. Then I read, oh no, so this is on par for me with Soccer on Sunday, The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. Wait, it's actually a physical book that I have. Who knew? Where is it? No? Oh, did I put it with the pinks? Yes, I put it with the pink books. Beautiful. Wonderful. You can totally see it. So this is one of the first mystery thrillers ever written, if not the first, by one of the first mystery writers ever, Wilkie Collins. And so, very hard to explain. This is over 500 pages, and I loved it. So we have this guy, Walter Hartwright, but the book's not really about him, and he's walking home alone at 1 in the morning in London, and suddenly this woman shows up, and she starts asking all these weird questions, and she's not a prostitute. She's alone at night in the middle of London, and she's not a prostitute. What? And while she's asking these weird questions, they discover that she actually is connected to somehow, in some way, to this family who lives in the north, far north of England, who is actually going to go teach the daughters of the family drawing. And the daughters are in the younger one is in her early 20s. Like even before that, she's like 18 when the story starts. She's 21 when the story ends, I think. And the older one is in her late 20s, and she's like 30 when the story ends, something like that. And so he and the older woman actually, Marianne, start trying to figure this mystery out. And then other things happen, and look, they're all interconnected. You have to and I do find that in older novels from the 1800s, they do have a lot of coincidences, like, oh my gosh, it turns out that this person's connected to this person, to this person. You have to suspend your disbelief when it comes to that. But I found this story really good. First of all, the suspense. Like it said in the beginning, this came out in a magazine, so it didn't come out all at once. And it said at the beginning that Gladstone, I think, decided not to go to see a play because he wanted to read the next installment. I think I know exactly which one it was because I stayed up late to read that part. And I've seen other people have also done that on the internet. But another thing I really liked about this book is actually the character of Mary Ann. I thought she was written very, very, very interestingly, especially for the time that this was written in. She is a mannish woman. She is described to be so both in her personality and in her looks. And but she has this interesting thing that when she is with men, she puts down women. She acts sexist. And then when she's alone or with her sister, she kind of sort of regrets that. It's never actually explored through the story, but I found it extremely interesting, especially when it comes to the characters that she is interacting with. But also the mystery in this book is good. This is good. And the villains, I love them too. The villains in here are so good. That basically what I'm saying is go read this book right now. The next book I read in March, oh my gosh, it's late. It was House of Glass by Sarah Pekkanen. I also really enjoyed this book. It's another mystery thriller. I just was looking for an audiobook to listen to at work, and I found this one, and I enjoyed it. So this follows a woman who, when she was a child, she had something traumatic happen to her. It's said very early on in the book that part is not a mystery. That's not part of the mystery. But basically, she suffered from traumatic mutism. Basically, she couldn't speak because of the traumatic thing she'd gone through. And she is now a child advocate lawyer. So basically, when parents are getting divorced, they send her to, and there's this very contentious divorce going on. They send her to decide who the child's going to be with, what the custody agreement is going to be. And there is this young girl who witnessed the death of her nanny and has traumatic mutism. And there's a contentious divorce going on that already started before the nanny died. So they send her to figure out what exactly is going on because police have sort of kind of also given up. Kind of have to, again, suspend your disbelief on that part. And I really liked it. I thought it was extremely well done. I did guess what was happening before she did, but I thought that from the place she was in, it made sense to what she was thinking. Then I read Magic's Promise by Mercedes Lackey, which is the sequel to Magic's Pawn. My thoughts aren't that much different. I did enjoy it more than Magic's Pawn because there wasn't romance. But I do have a whole vlog that should be coming out sometime soon when I get to finish the third book, which is Magic's Price, which I hopefully will do. So I'm not going to talk actually too much about it. I think I talked too much about Magic's Pawn as it is. Then I reread Ramona's World by Beverly Cleary, which is the last book in the Ramona series and also the last book that Beverly Cleary ever published. So the Ramona series follows this girl, Ramona. It's a realistic fiction book. And this one follows her in 4th grade, just her having fun. I liked it. I just really like the Ramona books. I love her as a character. I love this book too. I find her very relatable. Then I also reread Mandy by Julie Edwards. So this follows an orphan, and her life isn't bad. She just kind of feels herself to be different and lonely, and then she finds this abandoned house in a garden and starts taking care of it. And it's a lovely little book. Also definitely recommend it. Then I read That Inevitable Victorian Thing by E.K. Johnston. So this book I actually did not expect to enjoy that much. I thought I was going to DNF this. So this is a science fiction book, kind of. It's alternate history. It happens in our modern day, but an alternate history happened where uh, the English Empire is like good now. They do. So I will get into that in a second. But basically, we have this sort of friendship romance thing going on, and I thought it was nice. I thought it was just a very interesting book to follow. There isn't a lot of plot, but there is character stuff. Now, about the British Empire being good, yeah, it sounds bad. And while the characters don't really get into it, it is clear in the book that the characters are seeing stuff from a very biased point of view, and that it isn't all as good as they think it is. But the book doesn't really get into that part. But if it sounds interesting, maybe you should look it up and see what the actual summary is. Then I read Snow and Rose by Emily Whitfield Martin, which is an illustrated novel aimed at like 3rd, 4th graders. It is a retelling of Snow and Rose, published by the Brothers Grimm. And I liked it. I really liked it. I loved the ending as well, even though like I already knew what was going to happen. I liked the little differences she made, and I thought the illustrations were very pretty. I loved Emily Whitfield Martin's illustration style. Then I read The Grand Tour, or The Poor-Lined Coronation Jewels by Patricia C. Reed and Caroline Stevermeyer. This is the sequel to a book I read and the second in the trilogy to a book I read in February. I also, at the end of the month, I read The Mislaid Magicians or 10 Years After, which is the 3rd book in the trilogy. So the second book is my least favorite. I thought it was repetitive. So these books are all epistolary, and the 1st and 3rd books have our main characters writing to each other, but the 2nd book, they actually happen to be together. So one is a diary, and one is a disposition of the other character, and the characters are really similar, which doesn't matter as much when they're writing letters to each other, but when they're doing the same things, it really stands out, and I just did not enjoy it. So that definitely, I like the plot in this, but it definitely did not make up for the repetitiveness and the sameness of the characters. Now, the 3rd book I really did like. While I still had the problem of the characters being the same, very similar, which I also had in the 1st book, and also I find one of the characters' husbands so annoying and like, why would you even think it's romantic, but whatever. The plot was funny and interesting, and I really liked it. It was not as good as, in my opinion, as the 1st book. I loved the 1st book so much, but I did enjoy it a lot. But then back to the books, more in order books, I also reread again, another reread, The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. If you don't know this book, there are 2 magicians who set up a contest. And basically, they each have a kid that they put in the contest, and the kids build stuff in the circus. There is an overarching plot, but it's very overarching. This book is more about the vibes, which sounds terrible, honestly, but it really works, actually. Then I read Gabriella by Tessa E. Harris, who's American Girl's Girl of the Year for 2017. I really like this book. Oh, I also have a physical copy of this. Who knew? So many physical copies. So this follows our main character, Gabriella, who's 10, during the summer, and her community center, which her mother is actually in charge of, is about to be shut down because it's very old and a lot of stuff have broken down, and the city government, the Parks and Recreation Department, doesn't really see a lot of a reason to like keep it. So basically this follows her as she's trying to like raise the funds to keep this place. And two of the main themes in here are her learning to speak up despite her stutter, and also her learning to speak up for herself. Her parents and all the adults in this book really don't want the kids involved. They're like, it's not kid stuff. This is for adults. Adults should be worrying. Kids should be playing. And Gabriella and her friends really want to. The community center is really important to them, and they really want to take part. And I thought it was a lovely little book. It's 196 pages. I read it quite quickly, obviously, and I really liked it. I think it's actually one of my favorite Girl of the Year books that I've read. But American Girl just puts out good books all the time. Then, last book I read in March is Bird Brother, A Falconer's Journey and the Healing Power of Nature by Rodney Stotts with Kate Pipkin. So this is a memoir of Rodney Stotts, who grew up in Southeast DC and began his adult life basically as a drug dealer. And then he gets a job along with his drug dealing on cleaning up I forgot what the river name is, but a river in DC. And he starts really connecting to nature. It's something he's always loved, but it's not something he's really gotten to be part of. And through that journey, he stops drug dealing and becomes a falconer. And I saw that people did not like that the book was cut up into his past and his present, but I actually really liked it. So the book begins. So the past and present are in chronological order. So you will have one chapter, let's say 1992, next chapter 2017, next chapter later 1992, and then the next chapter later 2017. And I thought it was really lovely that it was set up that way because because they were connected. The emotional stuff, he made it very clear what the connection was of where he was emotionally and mentally in the 1990s compared to where he is emotionally and mentally now. This was not the best memoir ever, but I actually did like that aspect. It was an okay memoir. If it sounds interesting to you, you should go read it. It's not bad. It's not the best thing ever in the world. Now, honestly, it is nearly my bedtime. I set up way too late to do this because daylight savings is driving me crazy. Because my mind still thinks it's an hour earlier than it is, I feel no rush to get things done. But the fact is, I still have the same hours in the day. I still have to sleep 8 hours. I still have to go to work in the morning. I still have all the other things I need to do. But because it's my mind thinks it's 1 hour earlier, I'm like, oh, I have plenty of time. I have plenty of time. No, I don't. I still actually have the same amount of time. And so, anyways, if you watched, thank you for watching. This is very long and annoying, I think. So, hopefully see you next time.